Hello and welcome to another bearing removal and replacement video featuring Boca bearings. Now the subject of today's engine is a very beautiful 20 size two-stroke engine that dates back to at least 1988, if not 1987 or 86. I don't have any RC Modeler magazines that go back any further than 1988 where the ads or would have been published. But it's a very old design and it's modeled very closely after the OS 25 FSR, and this engine is the Magnum Pro 25 FSR. So what I'm going to do is remove and replace the bearings, disassemble the engine. Right now it's in its assembled state, and I've also got its twin on the table next to it, and its twin would be the Royal 25 FSR engine. Now both of these engines were probably made, in fact I'm sure they were made by Thunder Tiger out of the Republic of China or Taiwan back in the late 80s. Made in the same factory, very similar in design, almost identical engines. There's just some cosmetic differences. So with that said, let's go to the table. I'll show you the quick comparison of these two engines, then I'll disassemble that engine and we'll replace some bearings. Okay, so here is the Magnum 25 Pro 25 FSR engine, which is the one we're going to be replacing the bearings in. This is a brand new in box Royal 25 FSR. Now, as I said, these are both made in the same factory. They're just manufactured or just marketed under different names, and there are slight cosmetic differences between the two engines. And in reality, I could have even brought the 25 FSR from OS to the table, but I didn't want to confuse things too much. But I mean, these engines are basically sisters of each other, complete relatives. So with that said, I'm going to put the Royal engine aside. This is the Magnum. This was an engine that was given to me by a really awesome man and friend, customer, and it was just recently run, and he showed me the video, and it was just runs beautifully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just disassemble this engine, and we're going to replace the bearings and do an upgrade with some Boca bearings. Okay, so here is the little Magnum Pro 25 FSR crankcase, still with the bearings and crankshaft in place. So let's just get on with it. I've got various tools here, some off to the side that you can't see that I might need. Just seems like lately I've had poor luck with the rear bearings coming out on the crankshaft, which is always the preferred and easiest thing for me. But that's why I've got this miniature bearing puller chuck out here from the Boca bearings kit, just in case. You never know what's going to happen. So with all that said, let me go ahead and heat this engine up and let's get some bearings out of here. I'm going to move my vise right over here and heat this thing up right over this so I don't melt my beautiful Boca work mat. Now this engine seemed like it was a rather low time engine. Alright, let's see, that should be more than enough to at least get the crankshaft cut out. Did it come out with the bearing on it? No, it did not. So I'm really batting 1,000 lately with these engines, and that not coming out like that. So that crankshaft is rather hot. So let's go ahead and pop this front bearing out. It's probably going to be rather steamy too, and it is. Okay, so now to remove this rear bearing is going to require this bearing extraction tool, so I'm going to have to expand these jaws just a little bit so I can get in there and grip the inner race. Find that little gap just between the crankcase housing and the inner race of the bearing, and then tighten this needle chuck up and expand those jaws even further. Now this crankcase is really hot. I don't like doing this with a glove on, but this crankcase is still rather hot, and I can use that to my advantage, and hopefully it'll get this bearing to come out rather easily. So I think that is secured in there, so now it's just a matter of getting a punch that's the right size and tapping on the end face of that. I like one that's pretty big. Tap that thing out, so let's just see how. I like to take a little peek in there. I can't tell if that looks like it's moving yet or not. I might have to heat it some more. Sometimes these bearings can be a little stubborn. Looks like it's starting to come free now. I think I'm going to switch to this punch. And there you have it. I think this tool is cool enough. So there's our rear bearing. Can I loosen that up by hand? Yep. This bearing puller set has come in so handy lately from Boca's miniature bearing puller set. I would not have been able to get a lot of these bearings out without that, because the next solution is see if you can get an edge in there and tap it and get your punch on there on that edge and just tap it out. That's one method. Not as nice, not as good. Another method is heat this up a whole lot and then slam it straight down on a very durable surface and then just get that bearing to come out. I don't utilize a toaster oven or anything to get engine cases up to like 350 degrees, but for 30 plus years this heat gun has done the job for me. So I usually just do that, and I've always managed to get the bearings out one of those three ways. But this miniature bearing puller set from Boca has really been helpful. So there we go. Now we got the little small job of doing a little bit of cleaning of the crankshaft, crankcase.
Then we can get some new bearings installed.
Okay, everything's cleaned up and we are ready to install some bearings. So, as usual, I always have my
Boca Bearings
lightning lube road power on hand
that I usually dispense in a
small amount in my glass jar so that I can use as my reassembly lube and bearing installation lubricant. I love using that material. It just works beautifully. So,
our crankcase is all cleaned up, ready to accept bearings.
Nice and cool now. Our
Crankshaft has been cleaned up.
Also ready to accept bearings. So, with that said, let's look at what the bearing kit number is for these bearings for this engine. So this is the Magnum Pro 25 FSR, and I'm pretty sure that the Royal 25 will be exactly the same. And this kit number that I chose is just the standard economy bearings, and it's ENK-012. So, with many of these Boca bearings, they may have different types of shields and seals. This set has shields, metal shields. You can also get them in rubber sealed bearings if you choose. So what I've done here with this one, the front bearing, I hope it stayed like that. Yes, it did. So some of these shields, these metal shields, will just come out by just diving in there just above the inner race and pulling up on that shield and pulling it out. Many that are smaller will not. They've got a clip that retains them. So this is the bag that this small front bearing came in, and it's an MR6901ZZC. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. This one is an MR689ZZC. That C indicates clip. It's a ZZ, which means it's a metal shield, but it's also retained by a clip. So what I did while the engine was cleaning up there is I kind of pre-loosened this clip up, because there's so many times when on these small bearings, these little clips, they're cut like this. So you have to find the side where you can get your T-pin or very small pin in there and lift that pin up. And there are many times I've been doing this on video here where I fumble around doing that because it's really challenging for these smaller bearings. I usually have to resort to pausing and putting my magnifier on with my headlight and sticking my head down in here. So this time I chose to just go ahead and lift this up first. So there is, well, I hope you can see how small that little clip is. That's the retaining clip. Now what happens is this should just come off with a magnet. So you just take that shield off with a magnet. Sometimes you can kind of tap it and it'll work, but other times it won't. So that bearing is ready for installation. Now we can just go in here, like I said, just punch in there and pop both of these rear shields out for the rear bearings, because we want that to be an open face bearing. So there you have it. Now the bearings are ready to be installed. Now it's just a matter of getting all the parts prepped and lubricated. Now this little engine also has like a little brass bushing or bronze bushing here. So I did not take that off, I just left that in place, but that's just a little spacer because of the thickness of the bearing. As long as I'm in here, I might as well get the whole rest of this crankcase all ready to accept all the other parts too. This is a little bit tougher to get the oil down in here, but I do like doing it with my finger. Okay, so now it's just a matter of fitting this rear bearing onto the crankshaft, which is the way I always like to do this. That one just went on just beautifully. I like to do that because then you install the front bearing first, and that front bearing acts as a centering mechanism when you go to install the rear bearing. If you put the rear bearing in without the crankshaft, then you've got a chance of getting it in there cocked, and then it's a problem. So let's go ahead and heat this crankcase up and get these bearings installed, and then I can get this engine ready to go. Oops, I think I'm going to move this over here again. What I also need to do is adjust the positioning of that. Okay, so that crankcase is nice and warm. Let's just drop our front bearing on here. Look at that. I just tapped it in with this thing. Delrin block. Now we can just slide this in here. And using our little small drive here, drive that bearing home. It's not quite seated yet. There we go. Okay, that bearing is seated and it's got such a nice fit. This whole crankshaft will come right out. So there you go. Beautiful installation. Now I can finish reassembling this engine and it'll be ready to go to another owner. So many of you may ask, why are you always replacing bearings in engines that don't appear to need bearings replaced? Well, the answer is there's many reasons for it. One of them is that I'm also assisting Boca in verifying their website listings, and when I find issues or inaccuracies, then I'll feed that information to Boca. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is I just love tinkering with engines. And the third reason is any engine that's ever given to me, I don't ever sell anything that's been gifted to me at all. I may trade it for another one if it's another engine I haven't ever had before, but many times what these engines will end up doing is I'll run them 1 or 2 times and then I'll just give them to somebody that's looking for that size or displacement engine, and I just pass it on. And when I do that, I don't want to give them an engine that hasn't been thoroughly gone through, cleaned, and have fresh bearings. If I'm going to give an engine to somebody, I want to make sure it's in tip-top shape and ready for many years of service. So that's why I do this. One or several of the reasons. There are probably a few others that I could think of, but that's the main reasons. So there you go.